Good morning.
Good morning.
Yassi. Thank you very much for joining us. You're the Secretary General of the International Federation of the Red Cross, and we're here to have a conversation about refugees and migrants and how the media affects or can impact their lives in a fractured world. So perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about what the International Federation of the Red Cross does.
On the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, we are a network of 190 national societies in 190 countries, with over 15 million volunteers in the communities, being there to accompany people in need to respond to their needs. And today, among those people in need, of course, we count migrants and refugees. It is nothing new, but it is reaching some unprecedented scale and magnitude that we have rarely seen since the Second World War. 65 million refugees. If we take the migrant population altogether, including the refugees, we're talking about 125 million people that are on the move for all different reasons. So the human history is a history of migration. It's a history of movement of people. But depending on what the reasons are, for the move, that will determine what the needs of the people are. And we are there to accompany the people in their countries of origin, in the points of destination, and in the places of arrival. That means alongside the whole migration trial. And that is about protecting people. It's about also affirming their rights, because at the end of the day, human rights is also migration's right.
Absolutely. The question is, at the moment, there's a lot of sensationalism around refugees and migrants. There's the issue of terrorism in the countries of reception. There are, as mentioned, fear, identity and security. What is the role, do you think, of the media in what is the role of the media in helping the refugees and migrants in this particular situation?
I think the first role of the media should be not to fall into the sensation, not to fall into this populistic view of seeing migration as a problem. It's not a problem to solve. It is a situation to manage. To manage in a view that also when we look at what are the benefits of it. People move from one place to another, they exchange cultures, they bring different perspectives, they bring also new knowledge, they bring also skills, they also generate wealth and revenue for the countries of destination, as well as bringing back some revenues and remittances to the countries of origin. So moving away from seeing migration as a problem and then purely just as a natural human phenomenon that we will have to deal with and then to work with. And it is also trying to strike a balance between the different views that people have regarding this phenomenon. It is also deciding where to put the spotlight. Are we always going to be putting the spotlight, where we consider to be a problem, a crisis, a sensation? And, when we have, for example, in Europe, about 1 million people on the move coming into this continent, and it is called a migration crisis. Well, there are over 1 million people in Lebanon, which only has a population of 3 million. It's not been called a crisis. There's 1 million refugees in Jordan, another small country of 1 million. It's not called a crisis. 3 million are in Turkey, at the door of Europe. It is starting to be called a problem. As soon as it crosses then the Mediterranean or the Aegean Sea or getting into Greece, then it is a crisis. And no one forgets that migration is not only a one-way street. It goes into all directions. Europeans move to the United States. Irish people moved to the United States. Italians, they were migrating all over the world. Europeans migrate to Africa. And one does not even call them migrants. So they are, they have this cool appellation of being expats.
Yeah.
But it's the same phenomenon many people moving to the Gulf, contributing into the wealth and the development of that region. Nonetheless, we should not also lose sight of the fact that there are normal people there, ordinary people who want to do good, who want to show solidarity. And those ones have been all along the migration stride. Their stories are not being told. There are also the stories of those also who are misled, or simply they don't understand, and then they feel emotions like fear, misunderstanding, looking at people that they don't know. They look different, they speak different, they have other religions, they have other music and then sounds, and all of that, is not to be neglected. One has to understand that, but not to push on the wrong button, to exacerbate the fear and the rejection of the other, but looking more on, despite that, it is possible to understand, it is possible to integrate, it is possible, to be part of the solutions to the problems of the countries of destination, and not only to be seen as a problem.
So crucially, what makes them, this population on the move, more of a problem when they're coming into the West? We've heard what has happened in the United States since Donald Trump came into power. We've seen what has happened in Germany with the elections. We've also seen the vote in the UK on Brexit, which was primarily a story about migration and fear, etc. So what crucially can the media do in its role? Is it only a media problem? Is it a more general problem in terms of delivering a different story or a fuller story about migration?
Yeah, first of all, one has to understand that people who migrate, most of the time, most of them, they leave home because home is no longer safe. There are people who face multiple deprivation. They are not, coming in beautiful suits, with a suitcase out of an airplane. They're walking, through trials. They face hardships. They come totally distressed, themselves. And of course, this is not, the best state, that, people would like to be seen when they come. And that can be contributing, to the feeling of fear, of difference, of being seen, as a problem. But it is not because of the media alone. I think it is a whole societal issue. What the roles of the opinion leaders, the role of opinion leaders is extremely important. Their voices, count. How do they use that? Would they use it, to exacerbate the fear, to try to make political gains? Would they use it to further, reinforce, forces out there that could be forces of xenophobia, racism, all of that exists. They may be dormant, they may be expressed, in a very strong way. So the media can either, be a counterbalance in looking at the more holistically on the issue, and then showing, while understanding, the fears of people, but people sometimes do fear because they don't understand. They fear because they only see one perspective. They fear because they only hear one voice. They fear because they only hear one story. How to, tell the full story. How to also give voice, to those that do not have the voice. That is far away from the voice of, populism and the sensations, that are always, put on the fore. And then show the good examples, and there are many of them. Many of those good examples, are there, that including, some of the most successful people, in the different areas of work, of life, are migrants, or they are children, of migrants, but nobody talk about that today. This is only the problem that is being seen.
So there's a question of a one-sided view, in the sense that, when there is an issue, when there is a massive move, the focus is obviously there. Let's take it back a little bit. Historically, we've seen the Ethiopian famine, where the impact of the media was massive. That is in itself was not a refugee crisis, but it comes to mind as a point in time which everybody can remember, and the role of the media was massive. And then it did bring focus to this issue. It brought money. It changed government policies towards how they approached the media, how they approached Ethiopia at the time, and taking it forward with the sort of advancement in technology, etc. How do you think today that the media can really help to tell the whole story, alleviate fear? You know, there is fear, and in every moving population, there is an element, obviously, of manipulation within the moving population. That's normal, but how can the media really help to change that view?
So there are many good examples, of real challenges, that we've been facing, where the media has played an extremely important role in putting the issue on the table, which otherwise would have been either hidden or denied in many ways. So you mentioned, famine in Ethiopia. We have many stories of droughts, that happened, in many parts of the world. We have situations, of discrimination of certain population groups, be it women or indigenous populations, where people will never be getting to the level of consciousness if the media has not, played an important role. And that role is there, it is recognized. And I think the challenge that the media is facing today is just have to balance the view, to make sure, that the full story is told, and there are so many untold stories there. And what the media can do then even better, today, in the age, of digital communication, age of the interconnectivity, that is, quite unprecedented, where information goes, very fast, that also can be in the pocket of everybody or in the hand, of everybody. And to make sure that the channel is being used to provide useful information, to people. Where migrants can get, information, where can they get, guidance, where, they can be provided, with help, and support, to host communities, to also highlight, the good examples of working together, of integration, and so on, and not trying to point fingers, at anybody. We're not telling either to host communities who are not used to massive influx, of people, that if you do not, as we people who are working on a daily basis on this, have a full understanding and embracing everybody, then if you don't do that, you're accused of, being bad, and, called all kinds of names, because that is exactly that kind of attitude that will be alienating people, and they will be listening very easily to the populist views that can then take them into the other direction. The major role should be an empowering role, empowering people to better understand, put issues on the table, sometimes issues that are not the nicest ones. Most recently, it was the media that put a light on the situation of migrants in Libya,
That's right.
without which I think nobody would have taken, that at that level. It was the media, even though it is a horrible image, that may look sensational, of the small body of the small child, dying on the beach, of Europe, which is a terrible, modern story, but that has triggered, a reality, there. But it is also many other stories of ordinary people responding to, which I think it's the role of the media to also shed a light on, so that we do not only see the negative part.
If I just take you up a little bit on that, what is, how do you see compassion? Is there still compassion out there? It's not just a media role. It's also about the way that host communities perceive those people in themselves. So what is the role of compassion as another element in this?
For me, compassion is out there. It's always saddening. I work and miss many of my colleagues, in these areas for many years. In the most difficult crisis on earth, there is not one single one that we worked in and managed as Red Cross and Red Crescent. We are very close and we intervene very quickly. But there is not one single crisis where we're involved in where we have not already found people there already helping. That is just amazing.
Yeah.
In the most difficult places where the general view is a negative view, is it a view of rejection? You also find ordinary people getting out there. That they are not the wealthiest, they may be even belonging to the poorest of the poor. I saw that alongside the Balkan routes, where people sharing the last loaf of bread they had, the last bottle of water. The same thing in the northern part of Kenya when the refugees were coming from Somalia. It is the host communities that shared also the last grain in their home, to do that. There is out there a community of carers, people who simply care, people who show compassion, and that's what they do on a daily basis. Of course, we can always build on that, to have that network of solidarity, that we have, which I think is the majority of people. That's why we have 15 million volunteers of Red Cross and Red Crescent people out there, doing work, and many others in a number of other organizations, and many anonymous, people doing wonderful things. And this is the, human community that we belong to. That is the humanity that we share, and that is the humanity that cares, and that is the humanity of compassion. And that's what we have to nurture. That's what we have to support, and that will make the world a better place.
You've been out there, as a last note, and you're Senegalese yourself. I wonder if you can share with us something personal about this route, this migration route, particularly from Africa, where people are going through Sahel. I think it was Nima El Bagir who highlighted the story in Libya of the slave trade, rather, in Libya, and how migrants are being exploited. So perhaps you can share something of this route. What do people actually, to take it down to the level of somebody who's fleeing their home in search of a better life?
Yeah. Migration is not necessarily fleeing. It's about discovering. It's about going out there, learning new things. It's about going out there, also acquiring new skills, and then eventually getting also wealth, for yourself to improve your quality of life and of your family and community. And that's why I keep on saying it is a natural human history and phenomenon. What we call, the human trafficking route. It used to be a trade route. There would be caravans, across the Sahara, exchanging all the way, from the western coast, to Egypt, and then getting into the Mediterranean area. It is also a spiritual route that people used to walk to and then go to Mecca. It is a spiritual route that people, used to walk to, go to Andalusia, and, propagate, culture and civilization, and then go to Mecca or go to Jerusalem. All of that is part of history. And it is that same route that people are taking on today in modern times, because of new ways of development and industrial development, to get into Europe, which is projecting a model of development and then wealth that people also want to be part of. There are push factors, of course, that may exacerbate that. And these may be climate related, droughts and floods, where livelihood and livestock of people have been decimated, and they are trying to find new ways of improving their qualities of life. They could be push factors like conflicts, where people are running away to safety, and that is a responsibility of the human community also to provide protection and asylum to those people. But like in many good intention, in many good initiatives, these are opportunities for criminals to do also criminal activities. Human traffickers, slave traders, people that are developing all ways of illicit economies that are out there that must be fought, that must be denounced, that must also be presented like it was the case, by the media in Libya. But if that route is facilitated, if that route is protected, is getting a visa, is easier, is, we're putting less emphasis on protecting the border than protecting the people. If we are building less barriers and walls and then being a more open society, well, those criminal activities will definitely be losing ground, and, migration will become, what it used to be, exchanges, among people, a melting pot, of civilization, for the better of the world.
That's one. On the last thought, and specifically about the media. Of course, we've seen one part of that story, which is what happens to migrants once they finally end up in Libya. But what we haven't seen is the story along the routes. Why do they flee? Why do they leave home if it's not necessarily fleeing? What happens along the way? And in a society today where there's less money to do that, how do you feel that the media can really help to tell that full story?
I think the media today has more possibilities, to get out there, with describing a situation with digital means that didn't exist, before. And migrants and refugees themselves, they tell the stories through the devices, they have.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting story that was told, by my friend Filippo Grandi, the High Commissioner for Refugees, when he met with some of the refugees in Greece, asking them what was the most difficult time, during all your odyssey across, the sea to get to Greece. And the answer was quite a surprising one. They said, when we left the coast of Turkey, and suddenly we were in the middle, of the sea, and we did not reach, Greece, and we had no signal, on our
telephones.
On the telephones.
Yeah.
There are no signal, lack of information, lack of guidance, lack of connection, to the world. And I think that is also that connection that the media, can bring to, that can tell the story, and including the stories of integration, the stories of contribution, so that migration can also be seen, from a different perspective.
Hopefully it will be a less fractured world in the future.
Well, we all hope so. We are seeing that, there are elements, that will be contributing to a fractured world, but the consciousness and the awareness about that will definitely help mitigate it and eventually adapt, to make a fractured world still a world which is a conducive, for human development, for the best, of people.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much for joining us today and for sharing your views and the work of the IFRC in the role of migration and refugees, as well as the thoughts on the media. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.